Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm excited to share with you my research on the presuppositions in Steve Jobs' iconic commencement address at Stanford University delivered on June 12, 2005. This speech is widely regarded as one of the most inspirational addresses of our time. To start off, let's discuss the concept of presuppositions. A presupposition involves the relationship between two propositions where certain assumptions are made before a statement can be fully understood. For instance, in the sentence, Mary's brother bought 3 horses, for example, the speaker presupposes the existence of Mary's brother before mentioning the purchase of the horses. There are various definitions of presupposition. According to your pragmatic presupposition involves the speaker assuming certain background information prior to making an utterance. Your defines pragmatic presupposition as something the speaker assumes to be the case prior to making an utterance. Starnaker introduces the notion of speaker presupposition, which refers to the propositions that a speaker takes for granted in a conversation before he makes a statement, forming the background assumptions used throughout the discourse. The success of a presupposition depends on the assumptions of the speaker, shared knowledge among interlocutors, and their understandings of the world as illustrated in this figure. Now let's explore different types of presupposition triggers. Levinson states that presupposition refers to those inferences or assumptions which seem to be built into linguistic expressions and can be isolated by linguistic tests. That's why presupposition can be associated with the use of a large number of words, phrases, and structures. These linguistic constructions can be isolated by linguists as sources of presuppositions known as presupposition or lexical triggers. Based on Katunen and Yule, the triggers adopted in this study are classified into 3 major types: existential, lexical, and structural presuppositions triggers as illustrated in this model. The first type of presupposition is called existential presupposition. Existential presupposition assumes the existence of a certain entity before a statement can be valid. For example, before saying my car is expensive, for example, the speaker must assume that she has a car. Existential presuppositions play a crucial role in discourse as they set the foundation for further assertions. Soren states that existential presuppositions are the main starting point for presupposition theory in philosophy. The possessive constructions in English give rise to a presupposition of existence. Moreover, the existential presupposition is not only assumed to be present in possessive constructions, but also more generally in any name or definite noun phrase. The second type of presupposition is called lexical presupposition. Lexical triggers are linguistic elements that inherently carry presuppositions. They include implicative and passive verbs, change of state verbs, and other linguistic constructions. For example, when someone says, "You are too late again," they presuppose a prior instance of lateness. These triggers contribute significantly to the implicit meaning conveyed in speech. And the third main type of presupposition is structural presupposition. Let's look at this example. Before the police officer asks the girl how fast were the car going when it ran the red lights, he must believe that it ran the red lights. Structural triggers rely on the grammatical structure of a sentence to imply certain assumptions. Examples include collapse constructions, WH questions, adverbial clauses, and non-restrictive clauses. The structural presuppositions shape the discourse by framing the context in which statements are made. So now let's shift. Okay, now let's shift our focus on to the research methodology and findings. This is the research questions. This study is carried out in order to answer two research questions. The first one, what types of presuppositions were used in Steve Jobs' commencement address at Stanford University on June 12, 2005? And the second one, why did the speaker use presuppositions in his speech? This study adopts a descriptive approach to analyze how different types of presuppositions are used in Steve Jobs' speech and their impact on its effectiveness. The data collection involved transcribing the speech and identifying various presupposition triggers, followed by synthesis and analysis. This is the findings. The findings underscore the significant role of presuppositions in the success of the speech. The results suggest presuppositions are used extensively in Steve Jobs' commencement address at Stanford University. The data showed that this speech relies heavily on existential presuppositions, especially definite descriptions, whose ratio was constituted 63% of the studied samples. As to the structural triggers, they have constituted 23% of the studied speech, and the lecture items have recorded a frequency of occurrence 14%. To illustrate, let's examine some of the examples of existential presuppositions employed by Steve Jobs. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford, and all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. So in this situation, Steve uses the genetic case my working class parents' savings to presuppose that he has working class parents and they had some savings. Through his presupposition, Steve emphasizes that his parents had to spend all their lifetime savings on his tuition fee, which is very expensive to him at that time. And the second example, the minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked interesting. The definite description, the required classes, presupposes that Steve had to attend some required classes that he didn't find interesting. This involves more detail. This provides more details on why he thinks that dropping out of university was one of the best choice for him at that time. And the definite description, the ones that looked interesting, presupposes that there existed some subject that really attracted him. And since he didn't need to attend normal classes, he could devote his time to these meaningful courses. The next part of his speech also explains how the knowledge he gains from these courses became valuable for him in the future. And the next example, and it has made all the difference in my life. The definite description, the difference, is used to presuppose that there was a difference in his life. It shows how, by connecting all the dots looking backwards, he has achieved unparalleled success in his life. So you have trust. You have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. Steve uses the possessive adjective "your future" to presuppose that the listeners, the newly graduates at Stanford University, have future in their hands. So it serves as an encouragement to make them confident and positive about their future careers, future choices. The happiness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again. The definite description, the happiness of being successful, is used to presuppose that being successful was in fact a kind of burden on him. However, at that time he was fired from the company he had started and became a beginner again. Yet he found it comfortable since he did not have to bear the burden of being successful anymore and he could do whatever he liked. Here Steve means to demonstrate how a supposedly unlucky event can become a wonderful change in his life. Next, we will discuss different lexical presupposition triggers used in Steve Jobs' speech. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then I stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. Steve uses the iterative another to presuppose that he used to study at Reed College for some time. Though he dropped out of the college after the first 6 months, he decided to stay around and took part in some courses he found interesting at the college. The knowledge he gained from these classes then became a really important part for his later life. When we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. The iterative came back is used to presuppose that he did gain the knowledge of calligraphy, serif, and sans serif typefaces before. At first, he didn't really know how useful it is for his career. He just decided to attend the courses he liked. Later in life, when he and his team were designing the first Macintosh computer, that knowledge came back to him and helped him and his team develop what he calls our finest invention, the Macintosh. The iterative came back illustrates how important it is for him to connect the dots in his life. And so I decided to start over. He uses the iterative start over to presuppose that he did start at least once before. And in fact, you all know that he started Apple, his first company, and now it is the second chance for him to begin something great. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. When Steve uses the change of state verb free, he presupposes that he had been restricted by something before. In this case, Steve aims to communicate that being fired from Apple, he was able to remove the burden of being successful, and now he was free to do anything he wanted. That created an opportunity for him to enter one of the most creative periods of his life. Some structural presupposition triggers have also been found in the speech. When Steve Jobs said that Brian naively chose the college that was almost as expensive as Stanford, with a comparative structure almost as expensive as Stanford, he presupposes that Stanford University was an expensive university. He employs this structure to explain why he decided to drop out of Reed College and with the aim of developing a bond with the listeners, newly graduated students of Stanford University. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. Steve uses the adverbial clause of reason, since Windows just copied the Mac, to presuppose that Windows just copied the Mac. This expresses his pride in what he calls his finest invention, the Mac. It also clarifies that thanks to his decision to drop out of Reed College and spend time on typography, the Mac, as well as other personal computers, can have multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. So these examples demonstrate how Jobs skillfully employs presuppositions to convey deeper meanings and engage his audience. In conclusion, Steve Jobs' effective use of presuppositions played an important role in the success of his commencement address at Stanford University. By leveraging presuppositions, Jobs was able to influence his audience and deliver a compelling message that resonated deeply with the listeners without involving conscious resistance from the audience. Thank you for your attention.